I made this channel because I love co-op video games. Some of the games that I like are universally considered to be bad games. Here are 10 bad games that I like for some reason. The first one I want to talk about is Dragon Ball Sagas. Growing up, I was obsessed with Dragon Ball, and I just always wanted a co-op Dragon Ball Z video game. We always had one-on-one fighting games, which were okay, but we never really had a lot of games to choose from when it came to an actual story-based game that could be played in co-op, until Dragon Ball Sagas came along. I get that the gameplay is a little boring and it gets repetitive, but what I liked about this game is the fact that you could play through the majority of the story of Dragon Ball Z, and it's a 3D beat 'em up that can be played 2-player co-op. That's all I needed to enjoy this game. It's just insane that they haven't made another game like this though, or even just like a retro beat 'em up. Why has that not happened? Dragon Ball Z is the perfect franchise to make an old school Streets of Rage or Ninja Turtle style beat 'em up. So yeah, I don't know why that hasn't happened yet. But anyways, I guess I'll keep playing Dragon Ball Sagas every few years. Hexen on the Nintendo 64 is typically considered to be a pretty bad game, and honestly, I'm not really sure why. It's kind of a Doom clone, but in a fantasy setting. The reason why I love this game is that you could play it in 4-player split-screen co-op. It also has some RPG elements. You have different classes that you can choose, there's some exploration, and you can power up your weapons. Other than maybe some of the performance issues, I don't really get why people don't like this game. I think this is a pretty decent first-person shooter. And basically every Nintendo 64 game had performance issues, even the top-ranked games. So that should not come into play. So this is the game on the list that I will actually defend. I stand by the fact that I think that Hexen is a good game. However, a game that is not a good game, Troll and I. Let me step back a little bit. I think this is a really bad game. I don't actually even like this game, but I wanted to include it because I think it had so much potential. This is a game built around co-op, and it's a story. They really screwed this game up. The visuals are bad, it's glitchy, the gameplay is bad, the puzzles are bad, basically every part about the game is bad. For some reason, I'm still kind of drawn to it. This could have been a game like Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons or Journey or It Takes Two or something. It was set up to be a good co-op game. You each have your own roles. One player plays a human, the other player plays the troll, and you have to work together to get through the level and progress through the story. I guess just what I like about it is it's a story-based game with co-op, which is kind of a rarity in this day and age, especially local co-op. Yeah, this game, it's not good, and also I don't really like it. But I guess I just feel frustrated because I think it had so much potential to be something interesting, but the execution was completely off. I don't know. I wanted to talk about it. Beavis and Butthead on the Sega Genesis is also not a great game, but I really do enjoy it. It's kind of like a point-and-click adventure, but with some combat. And that's really the downside. The combat's not very good. You get stupid weapons, like you get a bat, or you could have like spit wads, or you can fart or belch. This is the weak point of the game. The part I do enjoy is the non-linear aspect of the game. The whole objective of the game is to gather the pieces of your GWAR tickets that were torn apart, and once you gather them together, then you can go to the concert at the end of the game. This is one of the games that I grew up with, so maybe I'm blinded by some nostalgia, but I really do see the parts of the game that don't work. I think that they took out the combat and just made it more of a straightforward adventure type game. I think it would have actually worked really well. Also, there's a little bit of platforming that just sucks. Basically, the whole entire sewer part of the game is just a nightmare. Every single step that you take gives you damage. You got slime and crap all over the place. That part sucks. But I do find it fun to just wander around the environment, looking for the items that you need to progress, and then ultimately getting the tickets. If it was more focused on just the collecting stuff and just took out all of the combat, I think this would have actually been a really top tier Sega Genesis game. But I still do enjoy it, and I did play through it and complete it with my brother back in the day. If you have some patience, I think this game is still worth trying out. Okay, maybe a controversial game is Double Dragon. Yes, Double Dragon, the arcade version, it's a bad game. A lot of people look back and think of it fondly, and that's because it's a really important game for the whole beat 'em up genre. It's incredibly influential. Basically, any beat 'em up that came out after it was inspired by Double Dragon. So I'm not taking away from its influence, but anyone that praises this game probably hasn't played it in recent years. I promise you, if you go back and play the original arcade game, you're gonna be disappointed. The performance is absolutely terrible. Every move you make is slowed down. The frame rate is so choppy. When you swing a bat, it goes in slow motion. When you jump, it's in slow motion. Especially when playing in 2-player, it's almost unplayable. But that doesn't mean there aren't good ports of Double Dragon. The Atari Lynx version's really good. The NES version's really good, even though it's only single player. And of course, there's all the sequels. So I'm not saying Double Dragon in and of itself is bad. I just think that the arcade version, it does not hold up. And it's not as good as most people remember it being. And same goes for the Sega Genesis version. It has a lot of issues as well. That's the version that I grew up playing. So all that being said, all the negativity about this game, I still do enjoy it. And I will play through the arcade version or the Genesis version every once in a while, just because for nostalgic reasons. If the performance was better, it would be a great game. But yeah, I dare you to go back and play this and then tell me it's a good game. It's not. Knack on the PS4. This is a game that I remember when it first came out, everybody hated this game. And honestly, I don't think that that's fair. I just think that it came out at a time where no one really cared about mascot platformers. We moved on to first-person shooters and big open-world RPGs. And this was definitely not that. It's a pretty simple, straightforward 3D platformer. And that just was not trendy at the time. And yeah, it's not a perfect game by any means. It might not be even a good game, but I do think it's better than most people made it out to be. Another Sega Genesis game that I grew up playing is Mighty Max. And it also came out on Super Nintendo. There's a lot of things wrong with this game. First of all, again, so many things cause damage to you. It's really, really annoying. You jump way too high. The controls are not very tight. It's kind of a mess. The object of the game is to collect little objects and then you put them into the portal. Once you collect them all, then you move on to the next level. And you could play it in 2-player co-op in split screen. This is one that I grew up with and I actually beat it when I was a kid. I definitely don't have the patience to do that now. When I tried going back to play this, it was just very frustrating, to say the least. But back in the day, maybe just because I didn't have a lot of games to play at the time, especially co-op games, I really did enjoy this one. But I'm not going to stand around and pretend like it's actually good. It's not. I thought it was good when I was a kid. Sonic Boom is another game that I'm not going to go out of my way to defend too much. But I will say that I think a lot of the negativity associated with this game is simply because it has the Sonic name attached to it. I think that if it was a new character, it probably would have been received a little bit better. But I will say the main draw of this game is that when you play it in 2-player co-op on your Wii U, one player plays on the gamepad and the other player plays on the screen. And I think that was an underutilized feature of the Wii U. It makes it so you have your own screen and you can split up. And it's a nice alternative to playing in split screen co-op. I wish more games implemented that. It's just kind of a cool little gimmick. But yeah, this isn't one of the best games. It's actually probably one of the worst Sonic games, but it's still better than Sonic 06, alright? Fantastic Four on the PlayStation 1. This is a game that probably not a lot of people even know about, and that's for good reason, because it's just not that great. But the main thing that it has going for it is that you could play it in 4-player co-op. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you could play as the Fantastic Four, each with their own unique abilities, and you can, work together to get your way through the levels. The main problem here is it moves very slow, and the combat is kind of tedious and frustrating. But just the fact that you could play it in 4-player co-op, which is pretty rare for the time, I think it's worth trying out. Also, it has this weird porno-sounding music. Definitely not fitting. The last game I want to talk about is 8 Eyes on the NES. This is another one of the games where I will definitely defend it. I think this one is often overlooked, and it's often talked about as a bad game for the NES, and I don't think that that's true. It's definitely a Castlevania clone, so it doesn't add anything too creative, but the 2-player co-op mode is actually pretty cool, as the second player plays this bird that can assist in combat as well as getting switches and stuff. This is one of the earliest examples I've ever seen of an assist mode in a co-op game. It's a little awkward to control at first, but once you get the hang of it, I think it actually works really well, as both players have different abilities, so you can just work together to get through the level. Anyways, 8 Eyes I think is unfairly judged. It's much better than its reputation, so give it a second try, especially if you can play it in co-op. So those are the 10 co-op games that are pretty bad, but I actually like. What are some co-op games that you think are probably bad, but you still like for some reason? Let me know. And if you enjoyed this video, check out our video from last week where we talked about co-op hidden gems. Thank you for watching.